Hey everyone, my name is Josh Burton. If you can hear me, actually, if you could just say yes on the questions, so I can make sure you're hearing me okay there. Cool. Thank you, Austin and Sean, and Lee, and all this list of names going forward. My name is Josh Burton. I've been doing CG for, well, about 12 years now. I started after, let me just start from the beginning. I'm from Oklahoma, and the son of two educators. Did art my whole life, and then after high school went to the Marine Corps, did 4 years there, and then got out and started doing freelance art for friends and a church and companies and whatnot. Just started doing freelance art, and always loved animation and wanted to get into it. So I started at Art Institute of Washington, and I then transferred to Savannah College of Art and Design, where I finished my degree in animation in 2005. Did a film there for my senior year, which did pretty well in the festival circuit, and got hired by Midway Games. Worked there for 3.5 years on titles like Stranglehold, Mortal Kombat versus DC, Wheelman, Blacksite. Did facial R&D on several other titles, some of them which did not make it after their bankruptcy. So mainly did facial work there, facial rigging, for a pipeline that was motion capture body work to hand key facial. And so that's mainly what I did there. And then I've been freelancing since I left Midway in the fall of 2008. And I've been freelancing since then. I did Swirly Rig shortly after starting freelancing to get my name out again and to try to get some work. And so that helped. And then did Morpheus. Last year, to push rigging, I'd mainly been doing animation for a while, or facial rigging, and wanted to learn more body rigging, so wanted to make that an exercise for doing that. And just tried a lot of stuff. A lot of Morpheus was just, I wonder if this will work kind of thing. And since last year I started doing Python, and most recently started a new company with some friends called CG Monks. And we have several goals, but one of them is making the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis. If any of you are like me, you have shelves in my, let me pull up my rigging shelf. It's a little crazy. Of tons of buttons that do one function and scripts from all over the place, and so we wanted to create a collection of tools that were easy to install and maintain for users. And so that's been part of what we're doing. So we've been doing that about a month. Got a great list of testers so far and get great feedback. I'm going to show some of the tools that we've released here. And we've gotten a lot of other contributors as well, and I'll cover that in just a sec. Let's see. So why tools? Why are tools important for facial animation and for animation in general? Intuitive tools save time, and if an animator can do a certain task themselves, it means that I, as a TD, get to work on other things that I need to get done, or to try new ideas and see if I can find a new way to do something. There's plenty of folks out there making tools right now, and so like for any certain function, there could be 5 tools out there that do the same thing. And so again, one of the things that we wanted to do with this tool set is to get people together so that we're pushing the bar forward in new things and not just recreating the wheel in a new way. And so one of the reasons we're able to do that is that we decided that our tool set would be free of charge. It will never be behind a paywall. And there's several reasons that we wanted to do that. One is that if there's other tool makers on the line, it can be very hard to control access to tools once they're out, and they have a tendency to get passed along to other folks. So, and I really didn't have any desire to try to make sure that person X or Studio Y, whether they had access to our tools or not. I really don't care. If they want to use it, that's great, because we can make great things together. And I take a lot of joy out of seeing what people do with the things that I make. So like with Morpheus, I spent 2 weeks doing an animation test with them last year, but there's been minutes and minutes and minutes of footage that I've seen that I take a lot of enjoyment out of seeing what people do with that rig, and so that's something that's important to me. Another reason that we make tools is that we want to be able to work in Maya the way that we want, and there's a lot of functions that Maya doesn't have, and so that's why we make tools, so we can do the things that we want to do in an efficient manner. Let's see. In terms of kind of what tools are in there right now, so the founders of CG Monks is myself, David Boxer, who's been a friend of mine since college, and I've worked on films with him and for freelance projects and other projects with him for years, and we worked together really well. And then Ryan Cummingdeer is a childhood friend of mine who's a great web programmer, and so one of the things that we want to do with CG Monks is to make a web presence, and it's not going to be called CG Monks, it'll be something else, but it's going to be a place to go to get answers and to get community vetted assets and tools and answers, and to be kind of a web studio to do projects as well. So he's working on some of that right now, so hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to start beta testing that. If you happen to want to try the tools that I'm showing, if you go to contact us on the page, you can sign up to be a tester here. And right now doing pretty much weekly, at least weekly releases of updates to the tools with documentation and whatnot, and then doing the weekly kind of video blog to kind of show what's new. But what I was saying about, because we're not behind a paywall, it allows other tool makers to be open to sharing their tool as well. So already we have Justin Barrett, Michael Kama, John Doublestein, my good friend Scott Engler, Morgan Loomis, Hamish McKenzie, who everyone knows from Zoo Toolbox. He's a great guy, and he's been a great help actually to this endeavor. And then Brendan Ross as well. So we have all these tools from these other folks that have allowed us to include in this pack, and so our pack is just a MEL file, a Python file, and a folder. You just drop in your MyScript folder, and you're off to the races. You don't have to do anything else. You don't got to set up anything or set up environmental variables, and it's just one of an easy pack like that. So again, this is my site. There's at least one other Josh Burton in the industry in New Zealand, at least last time I checked. And actually, his link is here if you want to find him. The other Josh Burton. How's it going, Josh? So let's get to what you're here for. So here's the Morpheus head. I don't know how many of you got a chance to play with the rig, but I'm just going to kind of go over kind of how it works, and we'll go from there. So this is kind of the customization setup for Morpheus. So Morpheus is a blend shape based rig, but I use a combination of joints and other blend shapes to do customization. So you can change his face in lots of different ways. I don't know. Let's just make something here. And then all the controls on the rig still work off of the whatever customizations you've done. And then there's these face shapers, which are the joint-based setup. Let me turn on. Actually, joints are hidden. I'll just dig in here. Okay. So here are the skin joints. And it's been kind of a while since I've been in here. So each of these controls, the face shaper is actually just controlling a joint that's weighted to this portion of the head that you can then customize as another way of doing it rather than blend shapes. And I did that because I couldn't get the full flexibility that I wanted just from blend shapes, and so having the ability to move the eyes or scale the eyes for customization was one thing that I wanted. And so with a lot of testing, this seemed to be a solution that worked. Let me select the face shapers. Let's see, face customize. All right. So those are a couple of tools. So my D hotkey is a Zoo set menu, and it's for quick selection sets. It automatically populates quick select menu, whatever quick selection sets are in a scene. It just creates a menu of that. And so it also has a menu for editing those. And then another tool, I have my hotkey hot menu for I have a reset selected kind of thing, and that's one of Morgan Loomis's tools. And there's some more in here, auto tangent, twin machine, and some other stuff. And then there's one more that we've recently released in the last pack, and it's a snap marking menu, and it's for just basic Maya, parent point, orient snapping, and match objects. If you happen to see any of our vids on Machinator, it's now accessible via the hotkey menu. So let's dig into the Morpheus a little bit more. If I'm going too fast, please say something as well. So the first thing I want to cover is, because this is a very regular question that I happen to get over and over and over again. So you'll see that his face is white, the textures are not showing up, and so we're going to fix that because that is something that comes up a lot. So I'm going to pull up my hyper shade. And the reason they're not showing up is that, again, let's see, where's that? There's the skin. So I'm going to graph that, and you'll see that all these textures are black, and that's why the shader doesn't show up in Maya. So we just have to actually fix those paths. So if I go to that folder, big pack, textures, skin. Let's see, spec. Diffuse. And texture. Hey, now we got some color. Amazing. So now everyone should know how to do this and not have to ask on the website and club or send me an email, because it's in many places. So we got that. Another thing that comes up a lot is there's different ways that TDs use to lock off things that they don't want animators to mess with. And so you can't select the geo, and it's not a layer. It's done via a drawing override. So if you go to the geo group and go to the attribute editor, in the drawing override section, it's just an override that overrides to reference mode. So I'm just going to turn that off, and now we can select the geo. Amazing. Let's pull up some of the geos. So Morpheus has a lot of blend shapes, as you can see here. So this is his facial rigging set. This is not the face customization set. That's a different one. If I hide this again and pull this one up. So this is the face customization set. And so this is the one that gives you all the customization here. So if you edit any of these, it'll affect the rig as well. So let's do that, and let's show off a couple tools on just general workflow. So when working with blend shape based facial rigs, and there's two kinds of facial rigs that I deal with. I either do blend shape based rigs or joint based rigs, and typically the joint based rigs are with video game projects, and that's just because game engines seem to prefer that. So because of that, there's some basic stuff with when you're doing blend shape based facial setups. So one thing that you're going to always want is a head kind of reset, and that's just kind of, I need to get back to 0, and you don't want that to be anything that's a part of the rig itself, like skin and stuff, because then it just complicates things. So let's pull up his face controls, and I'm going to reset those. Okay. So let's change his one of his nose shapes. So this is his nose squasher. So if I wanted to edit that, I got to find that target, and I believe that's it. Nose tip. I'll just do one of the ones I can find. So nose tip out. So we're going to bring this one up here. So I can see it. Another thing that I sometimes do, just workflow-wise, is I just make an extra camera. And viewport's kind of wigging out from this screen sharing thing, I think. Lovely. My menus are popping up top. One sec. Okay. So this is kind of my preferred method for working on stuff like this. So I'm going to put him back where he was. And then I can use this camera for working on this, and I can have a perspective view for up here. Awesome. Okay, so this target that we're messing with is nose enlarger, so it's this one right here. So I'll show off some of the basic tools for doing blend shape work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up one of my favorite tools for that. So I'm going to pull up CGMTD tools. I'm going to go to the Deformer tab, and I'm going to go to Blend Shape, and AB Sim Mesh from Burton and Ross is a tool that I love. So the first thing we're going to do with this tool is to select our base geometry, and it's going to verify that our mesh is symmetrical, and if at all possible, working with a symmetrical head is ideal. It's better for blend shapes, it's better for skinning, it's just better. So if you can get whatever customization you want and asymmetry out of your textures and whatnot, normal maps, the better. Just because mine is mirroring, skin mirroring, and other tools are wanting sometimes. Especially with blend shapes, trying to do asymmetrical heads is just tedious. So we don't have to do that because we have a symmetrical head. So there's some basic kind of things that this tool does which are pretty cool. And one of those is you have some basic mirroring functions. So if where's my, I don't know if there we go. I don't know what happened there. So you'll see that I'm changing this one here, and it's up here because that's the blend shape that's being driven. So if I wanted this to be my new blend shape, AB Sim Mesh can can mirror that across. So if I'm operating from, so I can just mirror that, and so it's just going to push those changes across the other side, which is pretty awesome. You can also reset. If I revert the selected base, it kind of gives me back to 0, and that's again why we need a base head that doesn't have anything going on with it. Another cool thing that you can do with this tool is, and again this is Burton and Ross's AB Sim Mesh, is if I wanted to say add this blend shape to this blend shape, there's an add function. We'll let you do that. Or you can also subtract, and it'll do the inverse. So you can really do some cool stuff. I had to do some pose fixers on a blend shape head I was doing a couple months ago, and so I was able to use that to make, for example, I had a mouth closed way mouth right shape, and I was able to make that fix and then pull out the mouth left shape, and then I'd have an easily additive blend shape to go on top of that, which wouldn't be compounding the transformations. It would just be additive of what I want it to be, if that makes sense. So that's AB Sim Mesh, and I use again this all the time. You can change your axes that you're working on here, but I would be lost without this tool. And he also has another for making left and right blends. There's several tools out there, and again, this is one of the things that you have all these tool makers making these tools, and so I've used for years Blend Taper, but I don't know that it's out there anymore except in people's their own folders. So in our collection we have, and I don't know actually who made that. Let me pull up my GUI again. So AB Two-Face again is from Burton and Ross, and I just played with this morning for the first time, but it seemed to work fine. But I had to create a weighted base object, and then I could make my left and rights from that by, let's see, subject. and so it made the left and right blends from that. But I haven't dug into this tool a lot, so I don't know what all it could do, but it seemed to work fine. So it seemed to be a suitable replacement for me for blend taper. Let's see. What else? So another kind of tool in the tool set is one of the downsides for blend shape based rigs, is anyone who deals with them a lot knows, is that once you start modifying the geo, you pretty much mess up all of your blend shape targets. And so I started experimenting last fall with a way to get around that. And I'd kind of done some prep work on it for the head baker for Morphe, if anyone is experimenting with that. Initially with Morpheus, I had just done a wrap deformer on like the eyebrows and different things to attach it to the head, but it really slowed things down, and so I wanted to find another way to do that. And so instead, the script that attaches geo to the head or the body bakes out. It's a geo baker. It bakes out from. Actually, I can just show you, and that would be a lot easier. So let me just do that. So I'm going to hide these, and I made a new kind of head here. And so let me just pull this over. So I customized the Morphe Geo head, and I duplicated it. So this has no history on it, no skinny, no blend shapes. It's just a modified Morpheus head. So if I want to then drive this head with my existing rig and blend shapes, I can do that. And I do that by here. I don't need that one. So it's the easiest if I show it. So again, I'm in the Deformer tab, blend shape mode. I got the head bridge geo because that is the geo that has the blend shape. Here we go. So these are all of Morpheus' blend shapes, and there are a lot of them. So I'm going to make sure everything is reset. And then I'm going to select this head and cross my fingers and hope everything's still working. Oh, I need a target. I should have kept the script editor so you could see it going. Okay, so what happened here is, let me lay these out a little bit better because there's a lot of them. So this is another just basic tool, and it's for laying stuff out. So I'm going to say I want 8 columns. I want more than that. I want 15 columns. Rows. Here we go. So what has happened is the tool has gone through and created a version of itself baked from every single blend shape of Morpheus, and then it has reconnected a new blend shape node on that head with all of those targets and transferred the connections so that let me hide the old head. The rig is now driving the existing. You'll see that the joints don't work, but that's okay because I got another tool to fix that. So this is just a blend shape based head rig now. So all of those connections are transferred. All the new blend shape targets are fed back into the new head. All the customizations are in there. It's just baked down to our new head. It's just compounding it because it's taking from the old and making it to the new. if I wanted to then skin in that head to the existing setup, let's see, skin cluster. Let's need to select the head as a skin cluster, and this is my head, and object objects. And so what that does, this tool, is it takes the source skin cluster, queries the influences of it. Let me select that head. So it queries all the influences that are driving that, skins it to the new head, and then copies the weights over. It just does it all in a button instead. So the reason why a lot of these tools came out is I was working a project the last 6 months, finished up a couple months ago, for a cartoony game project that I don't know that I can say the title of yet, but I had about 25 characters that were being up-res for the cinemas from game assets. So I was getting these game heads that I then needed to extract and bake on all of their blend shapes to the up-res heads to be blend shape heads as well. And so after I had those targets, I did have to go back and do some polish on them, of course, because they were up-resed, and so there's some new stuff. And if the verts aren't right on top of each other, of course, mouths have major issues because Maya doesn't know which vertice to follow, the one going up or the one going down. Because the tool as it is now is just using a wrap deformer from one head to the next to bake out those targets. And in the future, I'd like to look at some other methods of doing it, but for now, that's working. So again, I was able to extract the game shapes to the up-res heads, work on those, and use those as the cinema rigs with, setting up my own controls for the animators to work on that. And then when I got in, as you always do in a pipeline, you get updated characters again. I was able to, again, use the same tools to easily swap in new mesh updates, and it made for a pretty fast pipeline and fast turnaround for my client. And so they were happy, and I was happy because tedious work is just not fun for anyone. Let's see. What else was I going to show on blend shapes? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to a joint-based facial rigging. And one of my clients was kind enough to let me use one of the assets. Let's see. So here we have a game. I believe this is current gen, which affects joint count, of course. But so they allowed me to just tear off a lot of the most of the character and just have the face so that I could show it for this demonstration. And so what you have is, if this rig looks familiar, it is, because it's just a modified Morpheus rig that I used. And so the last couple facial rigs, I've actually done that. I just tore off the Morpheus facial rig and then used the pose buffer that the actual controls are connected to then drive my new set-driven keys. So what is a joint, a set-driven key, or a joint facial rig? It's a lot like a blend shape one in that it's really still about the shapes. And so I happen to store my shapes on pose holders is what I call them, but you'll see that. So like this is the brow in or down shape, and then I have a left and a right off that are being driven by the rig. And so for this one, the base mesh had lips parted, which at first I was not thrilled about, but actually having done it, I actually really liked it because it allowed me to not have to deal with so many headaches of mirroring skin weights across the face with the lip vertices on top of each other. Just doesn't usually work, and so it can be exceedingly tedious. So there's a lot of considerations when dealing with with a joint-based facial rig, especially for games. And so I'm going to try to hit some of those concepts before I dig in here. And again, I'm sorry I don't have a texture to show. I couldn't show that because it was revealing. So I just have a face, but I can still kind of explain the concepts. One of the big things, especially for game work, is shadows and the textures. You know, character artists tend to like to bake in shadows like in the nostrils, or, you know, at the lip, kind of that border as it transitions to the inside of the mouth. The eyeballs is a notorious place for doing that. And what happens is when you have that is that as soon as the eyelid, you know, travels up a little bit, then you have a shadow that's then baked in it, and it looks weird. And so you have it limits the range that you can get out of a character. And so as much as possible to not have shadowing in those textures. And again, this is for game projects. And if you want to have, you know, a wider range of emotion available on a character, to not do that. And again, on the mouth, I often see kind of a shadow line that's on that edge as it transitions to the inside of the mouth. And again, that as soon as you open the mouth, or you know, you go to a an U shape or whatever, it really pushes that out and makes it really obvious and unappealing. Another thing is on textures is making sure that like eyebrows are notorious for this. Make sure that the textures are within the boundaries that are going to be deformed. And so what happens is, let me reset this character. Reset. And I've got some poses on here. I usually put a range of motion on a face. And so to test poses, to test the textures, to test deformation. So what happens is if you have, let me find an extreme pose. There we go. If part of the eyebrow texture was on these polys, and then this is being stretched, you really get texture shearing. And so as much as possible to have the character artist keep texture that's going to be deformed as if it was objects within the boundaries that make sense is exceedingly helpful. And so this is something that I read into many times at Midway and as a freelancer. And sometimes it's something that can be fixed, and sometimes it can't. But when you can address it before the pipeline gets going too far, it's definitely beneficial. The model itself, it's important that in the face that a head model be evaluated for deformation. You know, it can look great in ZBrush, it can look great standing there or sitting there, but as soon as it starts deforming, if a face isn't modeled well for deformation, it's going to very quickly break down, and it's going to limit the range of motion that you can get out of that asset. So what's important? Edge loops are important, and I'm not saying that this one's ideal, but it's not bad. And so you edge loops around the mouth, within the lips, around the eyebrows, and edge loops are the loops, and as they follow the mesh. And so the more that they can follow the natural flow of the face, the better deformation you're going to get out of that asset. But also making sure that you have enough geo to get deformation is important as well. Like if you were trying to get some crazy smile line in here with a geo, with a mesh that's this low poly, you're not going to be able to get it well. You could look at doing it with a normal map, which I've seen done, also with wrinkles. But to be honest with your supervisors about and the modelers, that if you want a certain range of motion out of a mesh, it needs to have enough meat there to work with. Other important things that often get overlooked is the mouth cavity, and making sure that there's enough there that when you open the mouth that there's space. And the teeth as well. The lips ride up the teeth and the gums, and that's kind of just how they work, is the lips are always against your teeth, so whatever the teeth are doing inside, the lips are going to be affected. But oftentimes I'll see assets, and as soon as you try to raise the lips a little bit, you'll find that the geo stops, and so that's a pretty common issue. But there needs to be enough there that you can have space to move. Let's see. The tongue, if your project needs to have a movable tongue, to make sure there's enough geo there to do something with. With joints, count is a pretty big one with game projects. Is that you usually have a budget. A joint budget. So this asset, for example, is a 24 joint count facial rig. So let me turn off the polys. So the first thing, that's one of the first questions that I ask when I'm given a face to set up, is I'm like, okay, what's our joint budget, and what kind of range of motion are you going to get out of this character, and that's going to inform the decisions on where you're going to put the joints in. This may not be very clear with these joint colors, but let me change the background color to something a little darker. Is that clear? Is that easier to see? Hope so. No one's answering, so I'll assume that yes, it is easier. Okay, so again, this is a 24 joint count rig. So I've done this several times, and it can be tedious, but you can get away without doing a centerline lip joint with creative weighting, and it can be very tedious to weight, but you can do it. And because I had a low joint count with the setup, and I wanted to have, to me, having cheek squeezability is vital to have, range of motion in a face. I want to be able to get squash in the cheeks, and to get a good smile, I want to be able to feel that and to get squash and stretch in there. And so it's more important to me to have joints up here than to have another set of joints in the lips. And again, with creative rigging, I can still get a pretty good wide range of motion. Let's see what else. Another thing that's important to me is setting up your facial rigs to be off hierarchy. And there's several reasons for this. When I was at Midway, we had kind of a workflow that we were using that Scotty, my good friend. He's at Sony now, but he kind of made it possible to work. We had the idea, and he was the one who could actually get it working. And so since then, my TD skills have advanced enough that I could do it as well. But at that time, I was very excited. And so one of the things that we did is we have a rest pose. And so one of the things, like what a set driven key is it sets a curve, an animation curve to that joint. And so initially we started doing it, and we were just doing it on whatever initial pose that we wanted to do. But then that pose wouldn't zero out when you looked at the graph editor. Let me pull up a joint to see what I'm saying. All right, so like here's the let's find one that actually has some data. So here's the brow squeeze. So it actually starts at 0, and then it's 1 is its pose. So if we didn't have a rest pose, this would be somewhere else. So it's got to have its value. So its value is 9.596. So for us, that was the importance of having a rest pose. The other great thing about that is it enables us to snap our rigs between characters. And what I mean by that is I've got a script, and I don't have it as part of the GUI yet, but I will try to get that eventually. But if I have a new asset and I have the same joint count, all I have to do is snap the joints, the rig joints, the off hierarchy joints, to the new joint positions, and I can run a script process, which will then it sets a new set driven key on the rest pose, and so it sets its new rest, its new base, so that all of the other poses then work off of that. So then the rig is very easy to transfer from one to the other. I hope that makes sense. And Danny, actually most of my experience has been with Unreal at Midway and other places, and that's pretty much how I've always done it. Part of the pipeline is when you use the off-hierarchy setup is you need to bake it out, and then so you export it off. So we had a script process in that pipeline that we'd animate a scene, and then we'd run a script that would bake the animation down to the joints, tear off the facial rig, delete it, and then we'd be able to export that FBX to go to the game engine is what that would be. And actually this game project, they actually came back a few weeks later and they said, well, we want to add some more joints to the setup. And so I did some more stuff, and I can't show that, but I added more joints, so I ended up adding like a middle brow joint, which added more of the range. And I actually also added per joint controls, and I did it really simply. Let me select the base face. I'm going to run out of time here if I'm not careful. I'm going to try to go a little faster. I'll skip that. If you go back a couple weeks when I think it was last week's CGM Weekly, I showed how to set up control curves, and so I just set up a ball control curve on every one of the joints, the off-hierarchy joints. It was a child of that off-hierarchy joint, so it would follow with it. And then I constrained the skin joints to those joints, so then I had a per joint extra control to be able to customize it a bit. And I'm going to try to hit some of these questions again at the end. I'm going to try to save some time, so I'll try to get back to that as on. I wanted to show, so I don't know how other people do kind of the idea of a blend right and left with other SDK rigs. Well, this is one of the things that Scott England again created, and it's a part of the tool set. So if I go to CGM TV tools, and let's see where it's under here. Oh, this is another something that I wrote when I was doing this and got tired of refining the joints that were being affected by an SDK. So if I wanted to do that, you can just select the SDK joints, and it will go back and select just the joints that are affected by that SDK. So it makes it really easy to, oops, and it popped up my other window, to then populate these, to then set a new pose, and then I could go back and load my driver and rekey my pose if I want to. But it just got really tedious to try to keep track of what joints are being driven by what SDK. And so again, it's just I select that attribute, and then select driven joints, and it selects any of the joints that are driven by that particular SDK. But SE shape taper is what I was wanting to show. And so this is for SDK joint facial, what blend taper or that AB two-face is for blend shapes. And so how this works is if I wanted to split out, say, let's do the smile. So say I wanted to change the smile shape. So let's do that. So I'm going to open up a SDK. That's going to be my driver. I'm going to select smile. I'm going to go back to CTM attribute, select the driven joints, load them. All right. So, and let's go to smile. So say I wanted drive joint selection off. Let's see. You'll see I created my weighting dot for pulling this off the low joint count because that's the actual joint position, and that's where it is. So it's not 100% by any stretch. So if I did want it to stretch and I want it to be over here, and this one to be over here, There we go. And I was like, you know what, that is an amazing smile, and that's what I want it to be. So if I then key that, and then let me minimize this, go back to smile. You know, it's out there, but my rig isn't driving that because that's not my left and right shape. So if I want it to be, I would just go to SE Shaper, load it up, load shapes, and it's going to, and actually let me start that over because I've got my forward axis on this project was backwards. It was Z negative. Yeah, C negative. All right, load shapes. There we go. So it's going to generate a polyplane, which is denotes your blend. And then if I recalculate the mouse off that, you can also do it manually. If I wanted this to be, 50, it'll automatically pop it across. And so, actually, I'll show you the benefit of that in a second. So it's going to, because I use this tool to do these, it's going to be the same names. And so I can just say split shape. And now, you'll see that the pose is fixed, so that is what it actually is doing. And it's a terrible pose, but you know what? That's my pose, and I'm sticking with it. So what I was saying about this is it's not as the tool is intended, but it works. So one thing that I like to do is like a lip rollout. So I can make a lip rollout pose, and then I want to split it out. Well, the tool innately doesn't do an upper lower, but you can trick it. So I would just load this lip rollout, and then so I say this is going to be my upper, and this is going to be my lower. And then I go through, and I just manually go through here, and I say, if it's right, it's upper, so cheek squeeze is that. A corner is going to be 50%, that's going to be 100. Lower is going to be 100 on this side, upper 100, etc., etc., etc. And then I split that out, and it automatically splits it up to a upper, lower, and then I can go back and split out my left and right, if that makes sense. So again, SE Shape Taper, amazing tool. Would not want to do joint-based SDK rigs without it. We had a version of this back I guess we started off with our R&D on Stranglehold, and we didn't have it, and we were doing it manually. And we had like spreadsheets of like values of joints on certain poses, and it was just ridiculous. And so I begged Scott to write something, and he wrote the first version of that, and he's made it better since. And so it's a great tool. Let's see. Other things about joints for game spatial particularly is pivots matter. So where you place, a joint in a lip, it matters because when you roll that joint, you want to know what it's going to do. And so you just don't want to be placing your joints willy-nilly on the face, especially eyeballs. Eyeballs are huge. Having a good pivot point for an eyeball setup is very important for a myriad of reasons. And one of those is just for basic memory's sake. If the eyeball is having to translate to keep from intersecting, the lids every frame, that's extra channels of animation that's having to be stored and in memory. Whereas if you have it set up, and that was one of the things, back when it was a little more limited on Stranglehold, is we were trying to find, memory optimizations. And so the less channels of animation data, the better. And so with a good eyeball pivot with good geo, you don't need any translation at all, and you can just have rotational data on those joints, which saves memory. Another thing is sometimes I'll see, I'll get a face and the lower lips and the tongue joints aren't connected to the jaw. They're just kind of free-floating. And I'm sure there's reasons why sometimes you might want to do that, but in general, if you can avoid it, it's not only easier to set up when the lips automatically follow the jaw and the tongue as well, but again, it's less memory. If they don't get that free ride, they're having to have translation and rotational data for every frame, even if there's really nothing that they should be doing, the tongue is going to have translation and rotational data every frame of the sequence. So again, if you can swing it, it's a good idea to let it ride along. Orientations of joint is really important. When at all possible, I try to orient my joints to reset this again. To follow the face, the muscle path. So like it's like I set this up so it's kind of following along the teeth and on the lower joints as well. So you can, of course, set up your joints to just be world space X, Y, Z, but again, you're saving memory if you don't have to use every translational channel data, and it just makes it easier to pose when you're having to move those joints and mirror those joints and to get your good poses. It's faster workflow, at least to me. The only exception to that is I always, as much as possible, have centerline joints face a world-centric orientation. Let's see. Trying to hit all my notes. Oh, I did several Unreal Mobile packages, or not packages, but projects last year. And the vert count was exceedingly low on them, and so I had to write a tool. For whatever reason, Maya's standard, it just doesn't seem to want to maintain a maximum joint influence. So there's a basic tool for under skin clusters for finding verts with excess influence, and so I use that a lot, especially where when this face didn't have the centerline joints. Like trying to get a good blend across there with 4 influences was nightmarish. So that tool was very handy. And actually on the Unreal, I think my joint count cap was 2 vertices, or 2 joints per vertice, which was crazy low, and it was really hard to get good blends. So I don't know if that's just a limitation of the that system or not, but it was for that. One sec. Oh, this is something I started on this project here. Was changing out a mesh between you get a geo update and trying to send back to the modeler, hey, can you move the teeth back a little bit? Can you move this vert or that vert? I tried something and it worked pretty well, and I'm using our polyunite tool to do this. And so what that means is I have a group of geo that is the and let me split this for it split right, and I only want to see these here. Okay, so there's a polyunite node that is unifying, and again you can see on the CG Weeklies, I think there's actually a video just on polyunite, and I mentioned this, but I wanted to kind of show what that I meant by that. So this polyunite geo is actually deforming, and let me just deselect on this. Okay, so this is the polyunite geo, and it has a skin cluster on it, so it's skinned to the rig. But by breaking up the geo, I was able to do on-the-fly vertice updates. Like I had the ability to do some minor tweaks to the mesh and to work on positions. So like for example the teeth, if I wanted to try them a little further forward in the face or further back, I was able to do that while I had a rig face. And so I use this as my workflow for doing like tweaks around the mouth corners and the tongue. Actually everything. I use this kind of setup where I skin a polyunite and was able to mess with a non-skinned head to do whatever I wanted, and it just carries forth through the skin. And then when I was done, I just united the geo, copied the weights over, and I had the final head to hand back to the client. A few tips before we run out of time here. I'm gonna stay a little over to do some questions. But general animation tips, I do actually do a lot of facial animation as well, and it tends to be a lot of keyframe facial on motion capture body, which honestly is not my favorite kind of work, but I know it needs to be done and it pays the bills, so I do some of it. But I have, let's see, I think I've got that set up on this. Yeah. And let me show it back to all. So pose libraries are very important for, let me hide my pose buffers. Pose libraries are important for doing fast animation work, especially for facial. And so people have different ways of doing that. At Midway we had a GUI that had kind of buttons to push. Some people do it with mail scripts, they'll save a pose. Some people use triggers, and I've actually been using more triggers lately, and I've actually enjoyed that workflow. So what I mean by that is I've got a face cam that follows, it's constrained to the character's head, so it follows them around. And so I have some easy triggers to be able to select stuff, select the tongue easily, and then I have triggers for doing fast lip sync. So I have you know, all my basic phoneme shapes for when I'm blocking out my facial. And so it's just stored, poses stored the actual rig to snap to. And so it just moves it because I have auto key on its key. But again, there's many ways to do it. Some people do no buttons, GUIs, or whatever. But if you need to do fast facial, having some sort of pose library system is pretty vital. So I think I've covered everything. I'm going to go one last look through my notes. In terms of for TV specific stuff, the reason that I haven't gone with PyQt for development is mainly for distribution reasons. Talking to some of my TV friends, they seem to have more issues with, you know, people outside of the studio environment getting the right install Qt, or there just seem to be issues with consistency and getting things to work. So we decided to go with Hamish McKenzie's class wrapper for doing GUIs, and I've been really happy with that. So as our tools are being used by people, a wide variety of versions of Maya and OSs, that seemed to be a more stable solution. So that's all I have for kind of showing, and I'm going to open up for questions. So I'm going to go back and try to see how I can see these questions. I'm going to try to stretch this window. Okay, so if you have a question, go ahead and ask away. I answered that. Again, most of my projects I work on are Unreal, so all this stuff works there. Have I used, how do I load mocap? Actually, that would be something that Jay could maybe answer. I believe that's some of what they do is translating mocap to existing rigs. That's not really my cup of tea. I avoid facial motion capture. I think it's great, but it's just not something that has a lot of interest for me, so I don't really do that. I just mainly do hanky facial. Have I managed to get sticky lips or eye bulge into UDK using a bone-based system? For sticky lips, I'm just using the same thing I did on Morphe. I just have a shape that sticks lips, and it works pretty well. I've been doing, I think I'm on my 5th scene on my current project with this setup, and it's worked great. Let's see. Eye bulge. I don't really know what eye bulge is. I have eye follow, and that's just a part of the base rig that the eyes move the lids as well, if that's what you're referring to.
Hey Josh.
Yeah.
Eye bulge, I'm going to go ahead and guess, is most likely when the sort of, if you think about a squint kind of how the upper cheeks come up, and you get that sort of fine skin compression, up and around the eyes.
Okay.
The corneal push, as Danny just said.
Okay. Well, corneal push from the cornea push in the eyelid, I just have a part of my eyeball setup, and so I just do that via it's a node kind of expression system of where things are at and how they push. So when the eyes look up, the eyelids move up. Actually pushing the lid out, like on a vertex level, there's nothing that I don't do anything like that. And to what Jay was saying, I just do that with joints for getting squeeze around the eyes, and so when I'm doing a pose like that, I use the lower lid up and then squeeze, which brings the brow down a little bit and pulls the geo around the cheek up. Let's see. Naming conventions. Naming conventions are huge. I think it's vital, and I hate naming stuff. So actually a part of the CGM tool set is I've been working on an auto naming system, and so all of our stuff that we're doing ourselves runs on this, and it's just an attribute tagging system, and it's for naming objects. If you watch last week's CGM Weekly, I kind of cover that. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. And again, the system, when it's done, it works off of a config file, so it could be on a per pipeline basis. And I don't like naming things individually, so it's a way of I can select the top node of a character asset, run my batch namer, and it will find the correct name for everything in that hierarchy. Triggers running script jobs, yes. I use bow triggers, which was included with Morpheus by Burton Sayre from Moonbot. Zoo has triggers. There's other trigger packages out there, but I use bows, and this is kind of the GUI for that. And it's got a selection-based trigger system as well as an attribute system, which I use for doing the poses. The selection is what I use for doing kind of this for selecting stuff, and Morpheus has that in it. Danny, yes, the video is supposed to be available later on. Jay told me that earlier, so it should be up later. How would you get joints to ride on top of blend shapes for the finer level control? For writing on blend shapes, I haven't personally done that. I know you can do that, Paul. It's just that's more of a film kind of workflow. You're just not usually doing that in games, so most of it's been with games as joint based. My blend shape work was on Morpheus, and so that's all blend shapes. I do want to look into doing that. It's just not something I've really worked with. On the joint-based controls, I was trying to explain earlier, with the final setup for this character, I have a control that rides along with the SDK joint that the skin joint is actually constrained to, so I still have a per joint fine control if I want it, and I've actually used that a lot, and it's been really handy. Blend shape combination system. No, I'm not familiar with that, Kevin. I'll have to check that out. Is there different disadvantage for using influence objects with facial rigging instead of joints or blend shapes? You know, it's just different ways of doing stuff. There's really no right or wrong answers. It's just the limitations of your pipeline. I would think that game projects can't really do that just because that's not how game engines are set up. But if you're doing a short film or commercial work, I don't know why you couldn't do that. I've seen it done. It's just not something that I've used personally, but there's no reason you can't do it. Good tips for, Kieran, Stop Staring is a great book for the basics of facial rigging as well as facial modeling, and it covers kind of more realistic facial modeling, if that's what you're referring to, because it's very important to get a good realistic, if you are going that route, to have the geo modeled well. So I'd start there, and it should, I think it's on the third, or I don't know what edition it's on, but it's a great book. Have I considered meta nodes for auto rigging? Yes, I have considered that, Drew, but currently I like to keep stuff accessible, because I like for animators to be able to dig in a little bit, and so keeping stuff completely away from them is not something that I've wanted to do, and it's just easier for me actually to the current modular rig as it is kind of uses just a hierarchy of info nulls that stores the information, but that anyone could kind of figure out how that worked. Have you considered the point on poly constraints for secondary controls? Yes. I have avoided the point on poly constraints in the past just because they seem to be slow. I do use point on poly constraint or the node itself for doing, for example, let me just make something. I'm going to make just a sphere. And show. Okay, so I got the sphere. So one of the tools that we have is we have some surface snapping stuff. So I can just and I don't know if this is causing an issue here, but I can just do it here as well. Surface snap, and it snaps whatever object you have to the closest point on that surface. I do have some working modes of kind of stuff to ride along on a surface. For a project I did, I just don't have it accessible via a GUI yet. Let's see. Using nodes to store metadata connecting the message attributes. I avoid the actually message. Let's see, Lee. That's all I use. Is everything is within kind of the way that I do things is with message nodes, if at all possible, to avoid that very issue. And actually, I use that as a part of the when a name hierarchy goes through, it actually sets up a temporary null, connects every object in that to a null via message node, so I can keep track of what objects are, and not have to run some crazy test. It's just a simple way to do that. But message adders are awesome, and I use them a lot. Any advice for getting into coding, Paul? I think there's some good books out there. I just started messing with stuff. I started with Mel, and then my mom bought me, it's a huge Python reference book last Christmas, and I just started digging into that and just trying stuff. We release our full libraries, so if you want to start digging in and seeing kind of how stuff works, that might be helpful. None of the tools that release are compiled. They're all just PY files. So if you want to dig in, and if you want to help out, if you have experience and want to be a contributor, we're definitely looking for contributors. Do you allow layer animation on your rigs? Yes. I have used layer animation for lots of things. I tend to avoid it for facial work just because I like to know what I'm controlling, but I do use it for doing like shake on a character or doing when I have done motion capture stuff. I've definitely used animation layers since I need the motion builder or Maya. Meaning no math. Ooh. Well, you can avoid math to a good degree by there's great math modules, but some basic understanding of expressions and is a little bit necessary. It's not advanced math by any stretch. The highest math I took was Algebra 2, so I didn't take trig or calculus or anything like that, and I get along fine. I always have huge issue with joints for corners of the mouth, pinching. Yes, I agree, Lee. Definitely, corners of the mouth are just tedious as all get out, and especially if you don't have good geo, if there's not good arcs, if there's wedging or kind of oddly shaped geo, it just causes havoc. And so that's one of the reasons why that has to be really paid attention to before geo is finally signed off for deformation, is that those mouth corners work. In terms of weighting, like I said, on this asset, let me scoot the pose buffers back up. The rest pose is actually And this is the first time I've actually not the mouth pose fixed. So the base geo was modeled such that the lips are slightly parted, and I will say that that made skinning night and day easier. So I'm actually going to look into doing that in the future, is leaving the lips slightly parted with just a pose fix, because it just worked really, really well. Because the mouth area is notoriously difficult for doing good skin weights. Mirroring weights is a nightmare around here. Facial weight skinning is an art into itself. Is it possible to get normal map blending driven by joint movement? Yes, Danny. We did that on Stranglehold. We did it on several projects at Midway. I'm sure there's lots of other game projects that have done it. Will you put this fractal rig online? I can't put this particular rig online because this is a client's thing. If I do want to actually play with doing the next Morpheus 2.0 with joints instead, and if so, that'll be something that you can play with. So I'm more from a cinematic side, so using displacements on your mesh and which rigs control them. I'm not quite sure I'm following Hassan. Can you elaborate that question a little bit? Logan, do I use PyMel? I have not used it. My good friend Scotty Englert is a big fan of it. I haven't dug into it. One language for me is enough, so I can do pretty much everything I want to do in Python. But as I understand PyMel, some of what it does, I've started to do myself in terms of class wrappers for base functions. I don't have any problem with PyMel. Lots of people use it. I'm sure it's great. One language is enough for me at a time. My brain is only so big. Joints or blend shapes, quicker for setup. Well, Paul, once I have a setup, it's actually not too bad either way. It's the initial rig that takes the most time. Like this rig, for example, I did a project for this client last fall, and because I had done that and set up stuff the way that I do, I was able to take that rig and use it as my base. And like I was trying to say, just snap my rig joints to the joint positions for the new head, use my script to reset my rest pose, and then use that as pretty much a base to work from, and it's rather fast. I got the initial, like for example, I got this head from the client, and I had a working head rig within, I don't know, a day and a half with skin weights and stuff. So that was pretty fast. For blend shapes, it depends. Like I was showing, if I'm transferring, if I have a rig that I'm going to transfer, that process, like for example, if I had Morpheus and if I did a geo update to Morpheus, because I have those tools, I could update that within, 30 minutes, whereas trying to do it by hand would be days and days and days of work. But again, that's why I like to make tools, is to tedious tasks to make them not so tedious, and especially ones that are prone to Josh error, which I make a lot of errors, so I try to let Python fix that. Would be great to play with a decent joint-based facial rig. I don't know of any out there. I'm sure there are. But again, like I said, when I get back to Morpheus 2.0, I plan on doing a joint version of it. So I don't know. That'll hopefully be sometime this year, but we're working right now to try to get this first pass of tools done for CGM tools, and then get back to the modular rigger. And then my first real push using that system is going to be Morpheus 2.0. But it's a little bit down the road. But if anyone else has suggestions, by all means, if you say it, I'll repeat it, because I don't know if you can ask questions. Asan, corrective shapes that come through with displacements, the actual blend shapes. As I understand what you're saying, there's several tools out there that do corrective blend shapes. And I have seen it done with game setups. One of my friends at Midway, Tony Llewellyn, was doing stuff with muscles, with joints, but I don't know how he was doing it. It wasn't a part of my process, but it is being done in games. I just don't particularly know how it's being done. I would imagine if it's like how we did the normal maps, like for wrinkles, was just done by placeholder joint data on a 0-to-1 basis. That was just, it was along with the character file. And so that 0-to-1 data was baked into those channels. So we were able to use one joint for 6 channels of data, translation, X, Y, and Z, and rotation, X, Y, and Z, and just plug those into nodes in Unreal to drive the turning those normal maps on and off. I don't know if that answers that or not. Any idea when the tools might be released? The tools are being released every weekly. If you come and if you sign up on CGM Monks to be a tester, after today I'm going to let whoever wants to sign up today, and I'll send you the latest tonight or tomorrow. And then after that, we're sending out updates again at least once a week. Been working lately on hotkeys. So the snapping hotkey menu or marking menu has been going, and the set key one, which is a potential replacement for my to my S key, and I have Morgan Loomis's reset, drag breakdown, which is awesome. I wish I had known about this a long time ago. Auto change tool machine, which I really like, and some more Morgan's tools. And then the reset is just to reset the option varies that are being driven by that particular marking menu. There'll be more options in there. Are there any more questions? I'm going to go going once if there's no more questions. Twice. Paul, you are too kind. Why, thank you. Yes, Melissa, the webinar is being recorded. It'll be available later today or tomorrow, or Jay can chime in and say when it is. But that's all I've got. Dan, you signed up for beta testing on, I'll cover that, and then I will be done. So, contact, want to be a tester? And just fill out the form, and it'll post it, and I will get you the tools. And there's a closed email list for testers that I send out at least weekly updates on what's being worked on and trying to get feedback. So, again, we're trying to make a collection of tools that's being community-driven and written, and so we're getting tools from outside. It's not just our own tools. We don't have any qualms about using someone else. If someone else has done something better and wants to make their tools available, we'd like to look at it. So that's kind of our attitude. Cool. So that's all I got. Jay, if you want to take over. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Sorry I went a little long, but thanks for all the great questions.
Yeah, Josh, thanks a lot, man. That was super cool. It was really neat to kind of see the, both the Morpheus rig and, of course, this joint base rig you've been working on. Really good stuff. Thanks, everybody, for coming along. Real quick, I just wanted to show you guys. Let me make myself the presenter again here. Let's see here. If you go to the facewaretech.com website, we actually have a free facial rig library where you guys can download a whole bunch of rigs for Maya at the moment. We do have about 20 rigs we're going to be releasing of all shapes and sizes. Right now we're releasing one every couple of weeks just to kind of give us time to make sure they're all nice and internet ready, all cleaned up and everything. But a lot of these are, over the course of the last 8 years of the Image Metrics history of doing specifically facial animation and facial rigging, we've got a lot of assets that we've made internally for different types of tests, and even some of these just being fully experimental that are just not being used for anything now. We've kind of, the technology's moved on, or the particular project is not around anymore. So instead of letting them just collect dust and disappear, we're kind of revamping them and putting them online for learning purposes. So check out the website here. Also, our facial animation software, which is called, the pipeline is called Faceware, and within Faceware we've got a software called Retargeter, which is a plugin to Maya, Max, Softimage, or Motion Builder, and it's actually a free download on the website. So if you guys want to download the software for free and try it out on any of the facial rigs, you can even use it with Morpheus, to check out some facial animation on there. And lastly, we've got a free performance library, which is just about 100 different free facial performances that you can check out. So there's lots of cool assets on there. including my favorite part being the facial rig library. And check back every couple of weeks because we're going to have lots of new rigs up there. So cool. Thanks again to Josh for doing this. It was super cool, really informative. I did record the session, so give me a few days to get it sort of processed and up on the website, but we'll send out kind of a blast to everybody who attended so that you guys can have the link and figure out where to watch it.